Zay Flowers has finally spoken out, and some of the things he had to say could reveal a lot about the Ravens' future in 2026. Baltimore's top wide receiver opened up about the new additions to the receiver room, handed out some praise that definitely turned heads, and made it clear that something important is changing behind the scenes. But what caught my attention the most wasn't just what he said about the rookies. It was the way Flowers talked about his own role within the team. And once you hear his exact words, you'll understand why these comments have generated so much buzz among Ravens fans. One of the things that stood out to me the most was the way Zay Flowers talked about the two rookie receivers who just joined the Ravens. And this wasn't the typical off-season praise that players hand out every year. Flowers gave specific details about the mindset Jacoby Lane and Elijah Sarratt have shown since arriving in Baltimore, and I think that could tell us a lot about what the Ravens expect from them heading into 2026. When talking about Lane specifically, Flowers was extremely direct. He said he has that dog mentality. He wants to play. He wants to go get the ball. He wants to do everything. He wants to learn. Whenever I hear a comment like that coming from the team's top receiver, I pay attention. Flowers sees these guys every single day. He watches them in meetings on the practice field and during all the work that happens when cameras aren't around. Praise like that usually doesn't happen by accident. What makes this even more interesting is that Flowers basically put Elijah Sarratt in the exact same category. Right after talking about Lane, he made it clear that Sarratt arrived with the same desire to learn and the same determination to get on the field as quickly as possible. In my opinion, that might be one of the most encouraging signs for Baltimore this offseason. The Ravens chose not to bring in a big-name veteran receiver and instead decided to invest in developing young talent. For that plan to work, these rookies need exactly the kind of competitive mentality Flowers is describing. And there's another detail here that I think matters even more. Flowers wasn't talking about speed. He wasn't talking about size. He wasn't talking about athletic ability. The thing that impressed him most was their attitude. And a lot of times, that's where NFL success stories begin. But while these rookies are trying to earn their place on the roster, another important change is happening behind the scenes. Zay Flowers is starting to realize that his role inside this receiver room isn't the same as it was a few years ago. Beyond the praise for the two rookies, there was another comment from Zay Flowers that really stood out to me. Instead of simply saying he liked what he had seen so far, he made it clear that he intends to play an active role in helping these young receivers develop. That says a lot about how he now views his responsibilities within the team. At one point, Flowers said, "I'm going to lead by example, and we're all going to go." On the surface, that might sound like a simple statement, but I think there's a lot more behind those words. We're talking about a player who entered the NFL just a few years ago and now sees himself as someone responsible for helping guide the next wave of talent entering the organization. That alone shows how much his importance has grown within the Ravens. What I like about this approach is that Flowers isn't talking about leadership through speeches or constant locker room talks. He's talking about leadership through actions. These young receivers are watching how he practices, how he studies the playbook, how he prepares for games, and how he handles adversity. A lot of times, that kind of example ends up being far more valuable than anything said inside a meeting room. And I believe that could have a huge impact on the future of this position group in Baltimore. Lane and Sarratt are entering an environment where the team's top receiver isn't focused only on his own production. Flowers genuinely seems invested in helping the entire group improve. And that naturally leads us to a very interesting question. How did a 25-year-old player become one of the most important leaders in the Ravens' wide receiver room? One of the most interesting parts of Flowers' comments came when he started talking about his new role within the team. What makes it even more interesting is that he still seems to be adjusting to that reality himself. After all, we're talking about a player who is only 25 years old and is just entering what should be the prime years of his NFL career. Flowers even joked about it during the interview. He said, "It's kind of weird because I'm like the oldest one in there. I'm not that old, though." The comment got a few laughs, but it also revealed something important. Even though he's not actually the oldest player in the room, he understands that younger players now view him as one of the leaders of the group. The part that really caught my attention came right after that. Flowers explained, "It's teaching me how to lead. It's teaching me how to lead guys that are younger than me and take what the vets gave me from my years before and give it to them. In my opinion, that's one of the most important statements he made. It shows a player who is no longer focused solely on his own growth. He's beginning to take on responsibilities that are usually associated with established veterans and respected leaders. And maybe that tells us a lot about how the Ravens see Flowers right now. When you look at this receiver room, he's not just the most productive player in the group. He's becoming one of the most influential voices in that entire environment. But while Flowers continues to grow into that leadership role, there's another person inside the organization who has already made a very strong first impression on him. Not everything Flowers talked about was centered around the rookies. One of the most interesting parts of his comments came when he discussed Keary Colbert, the Ravens' new wide receivers coach. And honestly, the impression I got is that the relationship between the two has gotten off to an extremely strong start. Flowers had plenty of positive things to say about Colbert's coaching style. He said, "He is a great coach. He teaches the playbook well. He makes sure we're all excited." But what really stood out wasn't just Colbert's ability to teach. According to Flowers, the biggest difference is how involved he is with the players on a daily basis. In one of the more lighthearted moments of the interview, Flowers said, "He does the drills with us. He is down right now. He pulled a hammy." After laughing, he went on to explain that Colbert loves being directly involved in practice and enjoys demonstrating things himself whenever possible. I really like details like that because they give us a glimpse into what the atmosphere is actually like inside the building. Those are the kinds of things that don't show up on stat sheets or highlight reels. And I think that can be especially valuable for a young position group like this one. When a coach is actively participating in drills, showing techniques firsthand, and building relationships with players every day, trust develops much faster. Flowers made it clear that Colbert has already earned the respect of the room, but he also hinted that another coach has been playing a significant role in helping this group develop behind the scenes.
If you're enjoying this breakdown, smash that like button to help the purple flock grow.
While Keary Colbert received most of the attention, Flowers made sure to point out that the work being done inside the receiver room is far from a one-man operation. During his comments, he also highlighted the contributions of Prentice Gill, who was promoted to assistant wide receivers coach after spending the last 2 seasons working closely with the group. What really stood out to me was how Flowers described the influence these coaches have on the players every single day. According to him, they keep everyone locked in, engaged, and prepared to absorb information. At a position where timing, chemistry, and attention to detail are everything, that kind of coaching can make a massive difference over the course of a season. Flowers explained that both Colbert and Gill help players stay focused, while also making the learning process easier and more enjoyable. And I think that's incredibly important when you're talking about young players trying to find their footing in the NFL. Talent matters, of course, but the environment around a player often determines how quickly that talent turns into real production on Sundays. And when you put all of these pieces together, it becomes much easier to understand why Flowers sounds so optimistic about the future of this receiver room. The Ravens have 2 rookies who arrive hungry to compete, a young leader taking on more responsibility, and a coaching staff that has already earned the trust of the group. The big question now is how quickly all of that can translate into results once the season gets underway. What Zay Flowers' comments make clear is that the Ravens are fully invested in the growth of this wide receiver group. Jacoby Lane and Elijah Sarratt appear to have arrived with exactly the mindset Baltimore was looking for, showing a willingness to learn, compete, and earn opportunities as quickly as possible. At the same time, the confidence Flowers has in both rookies suggests they've already started gaining respect inside the locker room. Another major takeaway was the way Flowers talked about his own evolution as a leader. Even though he's still one of the younger core players on offense, he understands that his responsibilities have changed. He's no longer just focused on his own development. He's helping shape the next generation of Ravens receivers. And that's a significant step for a player who's become one of the most important pieces of Baltimore's passing attack. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Jacoby Lane or Elijah Sarratt have a real chance to make an impact this season? And which of Zay Flowers' comments stood out to you the most? Let me know in the comments below, because I'll be reading through them and joining the conversation with you.
And if you're a true Ravens fan and love keeping up with everything happening around the team, Don't leave this video without sharing it with a friend who's just as passionate. They're definitely going to enjoy this. See those videos on your screen right now? I picked the first one especially for you, and the other is recommended by YouTube. Go check them out, and I'll see you in the next video.